Good evening, everybody. This is going to be the 6th band by Seuss. I apologize for the lateness of the video, but just because it's not March anymore doesn't mean that we can't still celebrate Dr. Seuss. Now, I have only 5 of the 6th band by Seuss. The one that we are missing is the Cat's Quizzer. So if anybody has that, we would absolutely love if you would donate. If you can't, or if you don't want to, totally understand. I'd keep all my Dr. Seuss books. I am keeping all my Dr. Seuss books. But just know that we will not get rid of it. It will be kept in our archives room, which is where I'm at now. I'm doing this special video brought to you from the archives room, which is where we are now keeping our Dr. Seuss collection. At least for now. They may go back on the shelves soon, but for now they are being kept protected and preserved so that no one can take them and they cannot be sold. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with If I Ran the Zoo. It's a pretty good zoo, said young Gerald McGrew to the fellow who runs it. And the fellow who runs it seems proud of it too. Just want to see the pictures. But if I ran the zoo, said young Gerald McGrew, I'd make a few changes. That's what I'd do. The lions and tigers and that kind of stuff they have up here now are not quite good enough. You see, the things like these are in any old zoo. They're awfully old-fashioned. I want something new. So I'd open each cage. I'd unlock every pen, let the animals go, and start over again. And somehow or the other, I think I could find some beasts of a much more unusual kind. A 4-footed lion's not much of a beast, but the one in my zoo will have 10 feet at least. 5 legs on the left and 5 more on the right. Then people will stare and they'll say, "What a sight!" This new keeper's Gerald's quite keen. That's the gall-darnedest lion I've ever seen. Look at that lion with his 10 legs. That's crazy. Do you think he can walk like that? 10 legs? It's more than a spider has, and they seem to have trouble. At least I would. 8 legs. Ugh. My new zoo, Gru Zoo, will make people talk. My new zoo, Gru Zoo, will make people gawk at the strangest odd creatures that ever did walk. I'll get for my zoo a new sort of hen who roosts in another hen's top knot, and then another roosts in the top knot of his, and another in his, and another in his, and so forth and upward and onward. Gee whiz. See how each one has a feather sprout on its head, and the other one above it nests on that head, and then that one nests on that head, and then that one nests on that head, and that one nests on that head. You'd have poopy feathers on your head. But that's just a start. I'll do better than that. They'll see me next day in my zookeeper's hat, coming into my zoo with an elephant cat. An elephant cat. They'll be so surprised they'll swallow their gum. They'll ask when they see my strange animals come, "Where do you suppose he gets things like that from? His animals all have such very odd faces. I'll bet he must hunt them in rather odd places." An elephant cat? Yeah, I'm guessing he's going to get that from some far away land. I've never seen or heard of an elephant cat. But that's what I'll do, and said young Gerald McGrew. If you want to catch beasts you don't see every day, you have to go places quite out of the way. You have to go places no others can get. You have to get cold, and you have to get wet. Up past the North Pole, where frozen winds squeal, I'll go and I'll hunt in my Skeaglemobile. Bring back a family of what do you know, and that's how my new zoo McGrew will grow. I'll hunt in the mountains of Zamba Matant, with helpers who all wear their eyes at a slant, and capture a fine fluffy bird called the bustard, who eats custard with sauce made of mustard, and also a very fine beast called the flustered, who only eats mustard with sauce made of custard. I'll catch 'em in caves, I'll catch 'em in brooks, I'll catch 'em in crannies, I'll catch 'em in nooks. You don't read about geography, or that you don't read about in any geography books. I'll catch 'em in countries that have, or that no one can spell, like the country of Mata Fa Pata Fa Pel. In a country like that, if a hunter is clever, he'll hunt up some beasts that you never saw ever. I'll load up 5 boats with a family of jotes, whose feet are like cows, but wear squirrel skin coats. I'll sit down like dogs, but have voices like goats, except they can't sing very high notes. And then I'll go down Then I'll go down to the wilds of Nantucket and capture a family of lunks in a bucket. Then people will say, now I like that boy heaps. His new zoo, McGrew Zoo, is growing by leaps. He captures them wild, he captures them meek, he captures them slim, and he captures them sleek. What do you suppose he will capture next week? I'll capture one tiny, I'll capture one cute, I'll capture a deer that no hunter would shoot. A deer that's so nice he could sleep in your bed if it weren't for those horns that he has on his head. Oh, he is awfully cute. Look at how cute. His new zoo McGrew Zoo. And speaking of horns that are just a bit queer, I'll bring back a very odd family of deer. A father, a mother, 2 sisters, a brother, whose horns are connected from one to the other. Whose horns are so mixed they can't tell them apart. Can't tell where they end and can't tell where they start. Each deer's mighty puzzled. He's never yet found if his horns are hers or the other way around. I'll capture them fat and I'll capture them scrawny. I'll capture a scragglefoot mulligatawny, a high-stepping animal as fast as the wind, from the blistering sands of the desert of Zend. This beast is the beast that the brave chieftains ride when they want to go fast to find some place to hide. A mulligatawny is fine for my zoo. So is a chieftain. I'll bring one back too. I thought it was going to say I'll bring back 2. That would have rhymed also. So that's the chieftain riding on the mulligatawny. In the far eastern part of southeast North Dakota lives a very fine animal called the iota. I'll capture one who is even much finer in the northeastern west part of South Carolina. When people see him, they will say, "Now by thunder, this new Groot is really a wonder." This is the iota. Most beasts are quite friendly, but still in some lands, some beasts are too dangerous to catch with bare hands. For those that are ugly and vicious and mean, I'll build a bad animal catching machine. It's rather expensive to build in such a kit, but with it a hunter can never get bit. So here's a dangerous, scary, mean animal. And here is the catcher machine that the hunter can use. A zoo should have bugs, so I'll capture a thwirl whose legs are snarled up in a terrible snarl. Then I'll go out and I'll capture some chugs, some mean shooter, bean shooter bugs. The bean shooter bug. And I think this is the thwirl. Yeah. This is the chug and this is the chug thwirl. He looks sad. I'll have a big bug who is very surprised. A feller who has a propeller for rising. Oh, sorry. I'll bag a big bug who is very surprising. A feller who has a propeller for rising and zooming around, making cross-country hops from Texas to Boston with only 2 stops. With now that sort of thing for a bug, it just haps. Is just haps. And when I've caught him, the next thing you know, I'll go and I'll capture a wild tic-tac-toe. With X's that win and zeros that lose, he'll look mighty good in the zoo of McGrew's. So this is a wild tic-tac-toe. And then this was a big surprising bug with a propeller that makes him rise. Oh, look at that other guy. I gotta point him out really quick. Look at him. Cute. Cute. I'll bring back a gusset, a gherkin and gasket, and also a gooch from the wilds of Nantasket. Yes. And 8 Persian princes will carry the basket, but what their names are, I don't know, so don't ask it. In a cave in Khartoum lives a beast called the Natch that no other hunter has been able to catch. He's hidden for years in his cave with a pout, and no one's been able to make him come out. But I'll coax him with a wonderful meal that's cooked by my cooks in my cooker-mobile. They'll fix up a dish that is just so easy, or that is just to his taste. 3 chicken croquettes made of library paste. Library paste? What's library paste? Then sprinkled with peanut shucks, pickled and spiced, then baked at 600 degrees and then iced. It's mighty hard cooking to cook up such feasts, but that's how New Gru McZoogru gets beasts. That's pretty wild. I'll go to the faraway mountains of Tobisk, near the river of Nobisk, and I'll bring back an obisque. A sort of kind of thingamabobisk, who only eats rhubarb and corn on the cobisk. Then people will flock to my zoo like a mobbisk. McGrew, they will say, does a wonderful jobisk. He hunts with such vim, and he hunts with such vigor. His new grew McZoogrew gets bigger and bigger. It's the obelisk. And speaking of birds, there's a Russian Palusky, whose headski is redski and belly is blueski. I'll get one of them for my Zooski Magrewski. Oh, that's funny. He's funny looking. Then the whole town will gasp why this boy never sleeps. No keeper before ever kept what he keeps. There's no telling what that young fellow will do. And then, just to show them, I'll sail to Catrue and bring back an itch, kutch, a preep, a prue, a nurgle, a nerd, and a seersucker too. So we've got an itch, a preep, a prue, a nurgle, a nerd, and a seersucker. I'm gonna start with this one. I'll hunt in the jungles of Hippo no Hungus and bring back a flock of wild Bippo no Bungus. The Bippo no Bungus from Hippo no Hungus are better than those down in Dippo no Dungus, and smarter than those in Nippo no Nungus, and that's why I'll catch 'em in Hippo no Hungus, instead of those Nungus and Dungus, and people will say, when they see the bips bouncing, this zookeeper, new keeper's simply astounding. He travels so far you'd think he would stop, but when do you suppose this young fellow will stop? Oh, wait. He travels so far that you'd think he would drop. When do you suppose this fellow will stop? So this is the whole flock of Bippo no Bungus. Stop? Well, I should. But I won't stop until I've captured the Fizza ma Wizza ma Dill, the world's biggest bird from the island of Gwark, who only eats pine trees and spits out the bark. And oh boy, when I get him back home to my park, the whole world will say young McGrew's made his mark. He's built a zoo no better than Noah's whole ark. These wonderful, marvelous beasts that he chooses have made him the greatest of all the McGrewses. Wow, they'll all cheer. What this zoo must be worth. It's the gall darndest zoo on the face of the earth. So there's like this whole zoo, and then this is the last page. Yes, that's what I'd do, said young Gerald McGrew. I'd make a few changes if I ran the zoo. Alright, so that has been If I Ran the Zoo. Doing good on time. And To Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street. When I leave home to walk to school, Dad always says to me, Marco, keep your eyelids up and see what you can see. But when I tell him where I've been and what I think I've seen, he looks at me and sternly says, your eyesight's much too keen. Stop telling such outlandish tales. Stop turning minnows into whales. Now, what can I say when I get home today? All the way back to school, or all the way along to school, and all the way back, I've looked and I've looked. All the long way to school and all the way back, I've looked and I've looked, and I've kept careful track. But all that I've noticed, except my own feet, was a horse and a wagon on Mulberry Street. And that's nothing to tell of. That won't do, of course. Just a broken down wagon that's drawn by a horse. That can't be my story. That's only a start. I'll say that a zebra was pulling that cart. That is a story that no one can beat when I say that I saw it on Mulberry Street. Okay, so here's the zebra pulling the cart on Mulberry Street. Yes, the zebra is fine, but I think it's a shame, such a marvelous beast, with a cart that's so tame. The story would really be better to hear if the driver I saw were a charioteer. A golden blue chariot, something to me, rumbling like thunder down Mulberry Street. No, it won't do at all. A zebra is too small. A reindeer is better. He's fast and he's fleet. And he'd look mighty smart on Mulberry Street, on Old Lawn Mulberry Street. So now we have a reindeer and a charioteer. That rhymes, reindeer, charioteer. Hold on a minute. There's something wrong. A reindeer hates the way it feels to pull a thing that runs on wheels. He'd be much happier instead if he could pull a fancy sled. So now we have a reindeer pulling a sled. A reindeer and sleigh. Say, anyone could think of that. Jack or Fred or Joe or Nat. Say, even Jane could think of that. But it isn't too late to make one little change. A sleigh and an elephant. That's something strange. I'll pick one with plenty of power and size, a blue one with plenty of fun in his eyes, and then, just to give him a little more tone, have a Rajah with rubies perched high on a throne. Say, that makes a story that no one can beat when I say that I saw it on Mulberry Street. But now, I don't know. It still doesn't seem right. An elephant pulling a thing that's so light would whip it around in the air like a kite. But he'd look simply grand with a great big brass band. A band that's so good should have someone to hear it, but it's going so fast that it's hard to keep near it. I'll pull on a trailer, I know they won't mind, if a man sits and listens while hitched on behind. But now, is it fair what I've done? I'll bet those wagons weigh more than a ton. That's really too heavy a load for one beast. I'll give him some helpers. He needs two at least. Go meet him at the door. A band that's so... Oh, wait. But now what worries me is this. Mulberry Street runs into bliss. Unless there's something I can fix up, there'll be an awful traffic mix-up. It takes police to do the trick, to guide them through where traffic's thick. It takes police to do the trick. They'll never crash now. They'll race at top speed with Sergeant Mulvaney himself in the lead. The mayor is there, and he thinks it is grand, and he raises his hat as they dash by the stand. And that is a story that no one can beat when I say that I saw it on Mulberry Street. With a roar of its motor, an airplane appears and dumps out confetti while everyone cheers. And that makes a story that's really not bad, but it still could be better. I suppose that I add... A Chinese man who eats with sticks, a big magician doing tricks, a 10-foot beard that needs a comb, and no time for more, I'm almost home. So here we've got them dumping the confetti. We have the Chinese man with the sticks, a magician doing tricks, a 10-foot beard, and oh, no time for more, I'm almost home. I swung around the corner and dashed through the gate. I ran up the steps and I felt simply great. For I had a story that no one could beat, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. But Dad said quite calmly, just draw up your stool and tell me the sights on the way home from school. And there was so much to tell, I just couldn't begin. Dad looked at me sharply and pulled on his chin. He frowned at me sternly. There was, from there in his seat, was there nothing to look at, no people to greet? Did nothing excite you or make your heart beat? Nothing, I said, growing red as a beet, but a plain old horse and wagon on Mulberry Street. All right, now we go on to Scrambled Egg Super. I don't like to brag and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hooper, but speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves and the stuff people bake, well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Why, only last Tuesday when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. You see, I was sitting here resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs, and I sort of got thinking it's sort of a shame that scrambled eggs always taste always the same. And that's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use with all of the other fine eggs that you could choose. And so I decided that, just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked Salamagooks. A Salamagook, say, they should be good. So I went out and found some as quick as I could. And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a tizzle-topped grouse in a tree down the street, and I knew from her looks that her egg and the egg of the Salamagooks ought to mixed mighty well, ought to taste simply super when scrambled together by Peter D. Hooper. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up, and I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of horseradish sauce that was just sitting around, and also some nuts, and I tasted the stuff, and it tasted quite fine, but not quite fine enough. To make the best scrambled that's ever been made, a cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to the country quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. I looked with great care at the mop-noodled finch, and I looked at a beagle-beaked, bald-headed grinch, and also I looked at a shade roosting quail, who was roosting right under a lassalax tail. And I looked at a spritz flannel wing jay, but I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way, 'cause they didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill, short pace, birds. They were laying all over the place. Great, happy, gay families with uncles and cousins, all laying fine, strictly fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super. Scrambled eggs super de duper de booper. Special deluxe a la Peter D. Cooper. I picked out the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were grade A. I only took eggs from the very best fowls, so I didn't take eggs from the twindler owls, 'cause I knew that the eggs of those fellows who twindle taste sort of like dust from the inside of a bass fiddle. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet, and the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to the very sweet trout that they eat, and those trout, well, they're sweet 'cause they only eat wogs, and the wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs, and the reason they're sweet is whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch, and no reason though no bees can be sweeter than these, they only eat the blossoms of beezelnut trees, and the beezelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet, and that's why I've nabbed several eggs from the queet. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork, but with fur like a poodle. For they say that the eggs of this kind of stork are gooey like glue, and they stick to your fork. And the yolks of these eggs, I'm told, taste like fleece, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. The places I'd hike to, the roads that I rambled, to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled. I hunted new birds along wild, tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wriggled my way, and I crawled at a creep, through a forest of ferns that was 40 miles deep, and I mushed through the brush until I found a fine quigger, whose eggs were as big as a pinhead, no bigger. Then I went for the eggs of a long-legged quonk. Now this quong, well, she's built like just a little bit wrong, for her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air, and as they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch 'em before the eggs crash, you haven't got eggs, you've got long-legger hash. 'Cause any egg that drops from that height is gonna break. Yep. It doesn't look like she has any knees, like she could bend and sit and lay her eggs. That's unfortunate. Eggs! I'd collected 302, but I needed more still, and I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazole, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole, and they all of them jumped in their catamaslide, which is sort of a boat made of sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice, which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squitch, because those eggs are too cold to be touched, without which. So anyway, I'm on these big ice things that come up out of the water. And we've got a little grabber tool. And while they were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird called the pelf lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. That's crazy. How the pelf ever learned to learn such a difficult trick, I never found out, but I found that egg quick, and I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen along with the rest. See how much bigger her egg is than she? It's a big egg. But I didn't stop then, because I knew of some ducks by the name of the single-file Zummenzang ducks, who stroll single file through the mountains of Zums, quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs, and some fellows in Zums whom I happened to know, and some fellow just happened to capture 1,000 or so, and they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handle with care. Look at that crazy long line. Single file. That is a long line of birdies. I needed more helpers, so for assistance I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance, and Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of a Mount Struku cuckoo. Now these Mount Struku cuckoos are rather small gals. It's Ali. I think this is the Struku Makuku. It's a tiny little bird. But these Mount Struku cuckoos have lots of big pals. They dived from the skies with wild cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs, and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ali, brave Ali, he found his way through, and he sent me that egg, as I knew he would do, for my Scrambled Egg Super-de-duper-de-booper-de, special deluxe a la Peter de Hooper. There's Ali, and he's getting chased by all the birds' friends. In the meanwhile, of course, I was keeping real busy collecting the eggs of the 3 eyelashed tizzy. They're quite hard to reach, so I rode on the top of a hammock schnammock schnap. Then I found a great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their brains, for this kind of crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So to get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least. I came from behind, precisely northeast. And I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays them up high in a prickly cactus. Grickly cactus. Oh, look at that egg way up in the cactus. Then I went for some ziffs. They're exactly like zuffs, but the ziffs live on cliffs and the zuffs live on bluffs. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zuffs from the ziffs. But I know that the egg that I got from the bluffs, if it wasn't a ziffs from the cliffs, it was a zuffs. Now I needed the egg of a moth-watching Snee, who's a bird who's so big she scares, a moth-watching Sneth, who's a bird who's so big she scares people to death. And this awful big bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching Sneth is 'cause that's how they tame her. She likes watching moths, sort of quiets her mind, and while she is watching, you sneak up behind. You yank out her eggs, so I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. See, there's the moth watching Sneth, watching a moth, and then they're coming up and getting the egg out from under her butt. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at a store, why you have to do things you never thought of before. Why, to get the eggs of one very small dwarf, we had to pry all of one mountain top off. Then I heard some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air in the holes in Swiss cheese, and they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a treeful. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs, and said, hang the expense. Here's a big tree, and I just want the eggs out of the tree. Poor little birdies. I still needed one more, and I saved it for last. The egg of the frightful, bombastic, aghast. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, that I had to escape on a jill-ick-a-jast. And a fleet-footed beast who can run like a deer, but looks sort of different, you steer him by ear. Ouch. All through the searching, all through the looking, I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I stacked 'em, and I rolled up my sleeves, and I packed 'em and cracked 'em. I shucked 'em and chucked 'em in 99 pans, and then I mixed 'em in some beans. I used 55 cans. Then I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes, and 3 figs, and some parsley, quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. And then I added some cinnamon sticks and a clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. That's a lot of eggs. I think you'd need an awfully big pan to cook so many eggs all at once. And do you know how they tasted? They tasted just like, well, they tasted exactly just like Scrambled Egg Super de Duper de Booper Special Deluxe a la Peter de Hooper. The end. Now we go on Beyond Zebra. Said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell O'Dell, my very young friend who is learning to spell, the A is for ape, and the B is for bear, and the C is for camel, and the H is for hare. The M is for mouse, and the R is for rat, and I know all the 26 letters like that. Through Z is for zebra. I know them all well, said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell O'Dell, so I know everything anyone knows from beginning to end, from the start to the close, because Z is as far as the alphabet goes. Then he almost fell flat on his face on the floor when I picked up the chalk and drew one letter more, a letter he never dreamed of before. And I said, you can stop if you want with the Z, because most people stop at the Z, but not me. In the places I go, there are things that I see that I never could spell if I stopped with the Z. I'm telling you this because you're one of my friends. My alphabet starts where yours ends. Where your alphabet ends. So here's X, Y, Z, and this letter. My alphabet starts with the letter called Yuz. It's a letter I use to spell Yazamatuz. You'll be sort of surprised what there is to be found once you go beyond Z and start poking around. So on beyond zebra, explore like Columbus, discover new letters like Wum is for Wumbus, my high-sprouting whale who lives high on a hill and who never comes down till it's time to refill. So on beyond Z, it's high time you were shown that you really don't know all there is to be known. And then just a step farther past Wum is for Wumbus, and there you'll find and the is for Umbus, a sort of a cow with one head and one tail. But to milk this great cow, you need more than one pail. She has 99 faucets that give milk quite nicely, perhaps 99. I forgot just precisely. And oh boy, she is something most people don't see, because most people stop at the Z, but not me. So here they are, just kind of like, oh my gosh, that's a big cow. And here's the cow that has so many udders that she goes over a hill. It's a lot of legs too. I don't know how you'd walk with that many legs. I ramble, I scramble through swamp and through swamp. There, or where the letters get better, like letters like humph. There's a real handy letter, but what's handy about it, you can't spell hump-a-dumper without it. It looks like a fuzzy little E.T. There's a little... If you stay at home with zebra, you're stuck in a rut. But on beyond zebra, you're anything but. Why, I know a fine fancy letter called Fuddle. I use it to spell Miss Fuddle-de-Duddle. And oh, what a bird of. Her tail is the longest that's ever been heard of. So long and so fancy she'd be in a fix. If she didn't have helpers, it takes about 6. To tag along hoisting Miss Fuddle-de-Duddle's wonderful tale made out of muddledy puddles. And that's the letter. Or Duddle. And Glick is for Glicker, who lives in the wild weeds and spends his time juggling fresh cinnamon seeds, which he's usually able to find in great number, except, of course, in the month of September, when cinnamon seeds aren't around in great number. So that month he juggles the seeds of a cucumber. Oh, he's cute. And that's the letter Glick. And N is the letter I use to spell nutches, who live in small caves known as niches for hutches. These nutches have troubles, the biggest of which is the fact that there are more nutches than niches. Each nutch in a niche knows that some other nutch would like to move into his niche very much. So each nutch in a niche has to watch that small niche, or nutches who haven't got niches will snitch. There's the letter. And here's the nutches in their niches. Or is it the niches and the nutches? Can't you remember? Then we go on to Snee. And the Snee is for Sneedle, a terrible kind of ferocious mosquito, whose humdinger stinger is as sharp as a needle. The needle's too tough to be killed with a smack. The Sneedle is too tough to be killed with a smack. So he has to be hunted on elephant back. And your eyes and the elephants have to be keen, and you have to aim fast, and you have to hit clean. And the bullet you shoot is a stale navy bean, and that you've dunked for 3 weeks in old sour kerosene, which is awfully hard work, so it's easy to see why most people stop at the Z, but not me. So here's them hunting on elephant back. There's the letter, Snee, and here's him bringing back a really big, here's the mosquito using a really big thingamabobber. When you go beyond zebra, who knows? There's no telling what wonderful things you might find yourself spelling, like Quan is for quandary, who lives on a shelf, in a hole in the ocean alone by himself. And he worries each day from the dawn's early light, and he worries, just worries, far into the night. And he stands there and worries, and he simply can't stop. Is his head, or is his top side his bottom, or is his bottom side top? So there's the letter Quan. And this cute little guy here. Let's see. Is his head same that way? It kind of looks like it is. It's pretty crazy. And Thnad is for Thnadders. And oh, they are sad. Oh, one big one, the big one you see, has the smaller one, Shadow. And the Shadow, the smaller Thnadder has, should be his. And I don't understand it, but that's how it is. A terrible mix-up in shadows. Gee whiz. So, we've got a small guy with a big shadow and a big guy with a little shadow. And Spaz. Oh, that's the letter Thnad. And Spaz is a letter I use to spell spasm, a beast who belongs to the nasm of basm, handy for traveling. Handy for traveling, that's why he has 'em. More easy to grip 'em. More easy to pack than a suitcase or grip. These horns carry all that he needs on a trip. A thread and a needle for mending his socks, his toothbrush, a cup, and two three-handed clocks, and his velvet umbrella, his vegetable chopper, and also his gold-plated popping corn popper. and a grasshopper cage for his favorite grasshopper. So, he's got his corn popper, 2 clocks, 2 3-handed clocks, his favorite grasshopper, and that's the spaz. And floob is for floob, boober, bab, boober, bubs, who bounce in the water like blubbery tubs. They're no good to eat. You can't cook them like steaks, but they are handy in crossing small oceans and lakes. And Zats is the letter I use to spell Zatsit, whose nose is so high that most nobody pats it, and patting his lonely old nose is the least that a fellow could do for this fine friendly beast. So, to get there and do it, I built an invention, the 3-seater Zatsit nose padding extension. If you try to drive one, you'll certainly see why most people stop at the Z, but not me. So here's Zats, and here's the 3-seated nose padding, 3-seater Zatsit nose padding extension. And jog is my letter for spelling jagoons, who doodle around in the far desert dunes. Just doodle around, crooning very sad tunes about peppermint, peanuts, pebbles and prunes, and paint pots and polka dots, pinheads and pigs, and their grandmothers, grandfathers, stepsisters' wigs. So you see, there's no end to the things you might know, depending on how far beyond zebra you go. And that's the jagoon, or jog for spelling jagoon. I have a letter called Flun, and the Flun is for Flunnel, a softish, nice fellow who hides in a tunnel. He only comes out of his hole, I'm afraid, when the right kind of softish, nice music is played. On a kind of hunting horn called the O'Grunth, and to learn how to play it takes month after month of practicing and practicing. It isn't much fun. And besides, it's quite heavy, weighs almost a ton. That's why few people bother to play the O'Grunth. So the Flunnel's been out of his tunnel just once. Looks like a fuzzy bunny. And way past D is a letter called Itch. And the itch is for itchapods, animals which race around back and forth and back through the air on a very high sidewalk between here and there. They're afraid to stay there. They're afraid to stay here. And they think there is too far, and they think here is too near. Since here is too near and there is too far, they are too scared to roost wheresoever they are. That's a lot of birds. And this is the itch letter. There's a letter called Yek, and the Yek is for Yeko, who howls in an underground grotto in gecko. Jeez. These geckos love echoes, and this is their motto. For the best Yeko echoes, try gecko, our grotto. This is the Yek. And this is the Yeko. Oh, the things you can find if you don't stay behind. In a world near the sun live 2 brothers called Rooms, who, strangely enough, are built sort of like brooms, and they're stuck all alone up there high in the blue, and so, to kill time just for something to do, each one of these fellows takes turns with the other in sweeping the dust off his world with his brother. See, they look like brooms. And this is the broom. And hi, my letter for Hi Gargle Orm. For getting me places real fast, I'm all for 'em. They puffle along and their brakes never squeak, and they run every hour, every day of the week, from the town of North Nub to the town of East Ounce, making stops at West Bunglefield, Yupster, and Jounce, at Ipswich and Nipswich, and also South Bounce, and another small town that's too hard to pronounce. So this is the Hi for Hi Gargle Orm. And these are the Hi Gargle Worms. The places I took him, I tried hard to tell. Young Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell, a few brand new, wonderful words he might spell. I led him around, and I tried hard to show that there are things beyond Z that most people don't know. I took him past Zebra as far as I could, and I think, perhaps, maybe I did him some good. Because finally he said, this is really great stuff, and I guess the old alphabet isn't enough. Now the letters he uses are something to see. Most people will stop at Z, but not he. That's a pretty fantastic letter there. A list of letters for people who don't stop at Z. And here is the Yuz for Yazimatuz. The Wum is for Wumbus. The is for Umbus. The Hump is for Humpadumper. The Fuddle is for Miss Fuddle-de-Duddle. The Thnad is for Thnatter. The Quan is for Quandary. The Snee is for Sneedle. The Nut is for Nutches. The Glick is for Glicker. The Spaz is for Spasm. The Floob is for Floob Boober Bob Bab Boober Bubs. Zats is for Zatsit. Jog is for Jogoons. Flun is for Flunnel. Itch is for Itchapods. Yek is for Yecko. Vru is for Vrooms. And Hi is for Hi Gargle Orm. Last book, McElligot's Pool. Young man, laughed the farmer, you're sort of a fool. You'll never catch fish in McElligot's pool. Answered Marco. It may be you're right. I've been here 3 hours without one single bite. There might be no fish, but again, well, there might. Was he right? Just turn the pages and you'll understand why boys and girls everywhere consider this their favorite Dr. Seuss book. One of their favorite Dr. Seuss books. Young man, laughed the farmer, you're sort of a fool. You'll never catch fish in McElligot's pool. Maybe I can skip a little time by doing it like this. The pool is too small, and you might as well know it. When people have junk, here's the place that they'll throw it. You might catch a boot, or you might catch a can, you might catch a bottle. But listen, young man, if you sat 50 years with your worms and your wishes, you'd grow a long beard long before you'd catch fishes. Answered Marco. It may be that you're right. I've been here 3 hours without one single bite. But then again, well, there might. 'Cause you can never tell what goes on down below. This pool might get bigger than you know. This might be a pool, like I've read of in books, connected to one of those underground brooks. An underground river that starts here and flows right under the pasture. And then, well, who knows? It might go under, or it might go along down where no one can see, right under the State Highway 203, right under the wagons, right under the toes of Miss Umbroso, who's hanging out clothes. It might keep on flowing, perhaps, who can tell, right under the people in Sneeden's hotel, right under the grass where they're playing croquet, then under the mountains far, far away. This might be a river, now mightn't it be, connecting McElligot's pool with the sea? Then maybe some fish will be swimming toward me. If such a thing could be, then it certainly would be. So here's the sea, and then it connects to the pool where he's fishing. Some very smart fellow might point out that the way to the place where I'm fishing, and that's why I say, if I wait long enough, if I'm patient and cool, who knows what I'll catch in McElligot's pool? I might catch a thin fish, I might catch a stout fish, I might catch a short or a long, long drawn-out kind, any shape, any color or size. I might catch some fish that would open your eyes. Stout fish, thin fish, short fish, long drawn-out fish. I won't be surprised if a dogfish appears, complete with a collar and long floppy ears, woofing along, and perhaps he might chase a whole lot of catfish right straight to this place. Dogfish, catfish, cute. I might catch a fish with a pinwheel tail. I might catch a fish who has fins like a sail. I might catch some young fish, some high-jumping friskers. I might catch an old one with long flowing whiskers. I might catch a fish with a long curly nose. I might catch a fish like a rooster that crows. I might catch a fish with a checkered board belly, or even a fish made of strawberry jelly. I might catch a seahorse, now mightn't I now? I might catch a fish who is partly a cow. Some fish from the tropics, all sunburned and hot, might decide to swim up. Well, mightn't they? Might they not? Racing up north for a chance to get cool, full steam ahead for McElligot's pool. Some Eskimo fish from beyond Hudson Bay might decide to swim down, might be headed this way. It's a pretty long trip, but they might and they may. I might catch an eel. Well, I might, it depends. A long twisting eel with lots of strange bends, and oddly enough, with a head on both ends. One doesn't catch this kind of fish as a rule, but the chances are fine in McElligot's pool. I might catch a fish with a terrible grouch, or an Australian fish with a kangaroo pouch. Who wants to catch small ones like mackerel or trout? Say, I'll catch a sawfish with a long snout that he needs an assistant to help him out. If I wait long enough, if I'm patient and cool, who knows what I'll catch in McElligot's pool? Some roughneck old lobster, all gristle and muscle, might grab at my bait, but then I would have a tussle. To land one so tough might take a moment, or take 2 or 3 hours, but the next might be easy. The kind that likes flowers. I might catch some sort of fast-moving bloke who zips through the waves with an overarm stroke. And I might, and I may. That's really no joke. A fish even faster, a fish, if you please, who slides down the sides of a strange island on skis. He might ski over and pay me a visit. That's not impossible now, or really now, is it? Some circus fish, some fish from an acrobat school, might stage a big show in McElligot's pool. Or I might catch a fish from a stranger place yet, from the world's highest river, far off in Tibet, where the falls are so steep and that it's dangerous to ride 'em, so the fish put up chutes and they float down beside 'em. From the world's deepest ocean, from way down below, from the mud where the deep divers go, from down in the mire and the muck and the murk, I might catch a fish who are all going glurk, 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 glurk. Whales! I'll catch whales, yes. A whole herd of whales, all spouting their spouts and thrashing their tails. I'll catch 50 whales, then I'll stop for the day, 'cause there's nothing that's bigger than whales, so they say. Still, of course, it might be that there is something bigger, some sort of kind of thingamajigger. A fish that's so big, if you know what I mean, that he makes a whale look like a tiny sardine. Oh, the sea is so full of a number of fish. If a fellow is patient, he might get his wish. And that's why I think that I'm not such a fool when I sit here and fish in McElligot's pool. The end. Okay, so as for now, our Dr. Seuss collection will remain in the archives room. But if we are able to put them back on the shelf, they will be available for checkout. This video does not include a craft. This was a special video to just showcase the books that were banned by Dr. Seuss. Thank you for joining me. I hope you were able to sit through this hour, and I will see you on our next video.